Hello students, and welcome back to the Lore of the Iron Kingdoms with me, Professor Caster. And for everybody that is new to class, this is a lore reading and discussion course of the World of the Iron Kingdoms and the tabletop wargame Warmachine. Originally created by Privateerpress and recently acquired by Steamforged Games. But back to what we're here to discuss. Today we're going to be talking about the Protectorate of Menoth, and we're going to be going over more of their Character Warjacks, Warjacks that have become so specialized that they are one of a kind. But before we get into that, thank you guys so much for showing up to class, and if you are enjoying this course, please like, subscribe, let your friends and fellow gamers know about this particular course. It does help keep the Steam train rolling. And please comment, because I love seeing you guys comment. I love keeping that discussion going about whatever we do in these videos. If you like it, don't like it, whatever, please comment. It does help, especially with my higher-ups being the YouTube algorithm and lets more of our fellow gamers find these courses. And another shout-out thank you to Steamforged Games for letting me continue to read this fantastic lore and help everybody learn about this fantastic world that we are in the Warmachine universe. But without further ado, let's begin. Blood of Martyrs. A Warjack absorbs and learns from the personality of its Warcaster over time. Emotion bleeds into its cortex, informing its behavior and disposition. It is no surprise then that the favored Warjack of the Flame of Sorrows fights with all the bitter resolve of its mistress. The death of Menites by infidel hands spurs the machine to violence. Its hull spattered with the blood of the faithful, the Jack weaves through the midst of the enemy, eluding their strikes with impunity. Menoth grants his servants. Blood of Martyrs unfailingly seeks out those who have laid low the righteous and delivers unto them the consequences of their transgressions. The Jack's desire for vengeance is unsatiable. The Protectorate scribes have likened the machine to the first knights of Menoth, who lived only to mete out retribution upon the enemies of the faith. The Warjack originally entered Thyra's service in the closing months of the Signarin occupation of Sol. The young Warcaster and her forces fought tirelessly against the invaders, pushing them back street by bloody street. Although scores of the Jacks were reduced to scraps, her favored Crusader survived. During that particularly savage engagement, to which the majority of Thyra's soldiers fell, the Jacks laid into the enemy with such violence that the Signarns fled just when the victory seemed assured. The young Warcaster recognized that Menoth had sent this Warjack to guard her and mirror her rage she felt. She rearmed it with the weapons required to carry out its holy destiny and named it the Blood of Martyrs, knowing that its two blades would strike down an unbeliever for every drop of righteous blood the enemy had spilled. It has since joined her in countless difficult and harrowing engagements, sometimes cloaked by Thyra's magic to pass unseen among the faithless before she urges it to strike. Thyra has conducted an unceasing series of incursion strikes behind enemy lines, taking only a few troops and her most trustworthy machines, as she seeks out key enemy leaders to eliminate. In these fights, Blood of Martyrs has served many roles, including heavy-hitting finisher, fearsome diversions to draw away foes, and interceptors of enemies' jacks that would otherwise have thwarted its mistress. There have been many times it might have fallen and been left behind, as has been the fate of others, lesser machines, yet Blood of Martyrs still stands, as though touched by the same greater purpose as Thyra herself. And as you're probably aware, this is Thyra's personal Warjack, a double-blade-wielding Crusader chassis. So, yeah, and for Thyra, who is a very, well, I believe she is a sister of the Flame, so she's very, well, assassin-esque, if you will. Having a Crusader Heavy Jack as her particular favored Warjack is kind of incredible for the more sneaky of the assassin-type Warcasters, so yeah, makes him even more terrifying, and his ability to take on way larger Warjacks when you're in the midst of battle or behind enemy lines, that probably makes him incredibly useful. But let's read over his Mark III to Mark IV changes and see why he is so useful to Thyra and her abilities. Oh, and slight correction, it is the Daughters of the Flame, not the Sisters of the Flame. I don't know where I got Sisters of the Flame, might be a weird dimensional shift there, but Daughters of the Flame are the assassin group. Let's get back to it. And as always, let's start with the stat line. He has a speed 5, He is a mat 8, so he's actually gone up in mat, making him even more detrimental in melee. He is a defense 12, also making him more dodgy than his counterparts, and making him more dodgy than his original. And his arm is still at a grand total of 19. And of course he is a heavy warjack, so all of the abilities like slam, trample, and headbutt are his as well, so he can just still knock out all the normal stuff. Let's read over his fun abilities. So his bond, his thing that makes him Thyra's Warjack, is it's bonded to her, so it begins the game bonded to her. Not considered bonded if it's under your opponent's control, all that standard stuff that goes with the bonding. But she gives it, while bonded, apparition. So during the control phase, you can place a model with apparition anywhere completely within 2 inches of its current location. And for that ability alone, you can place it so it's placed, so it's not leaving, like if it was in combat, it's not leaving the combat zone, so it doesn't lose the ability to charge out. So you could literally take him, place him 2 inches outside of melee range of somebody, and then when he does his normal activation, he is no longer engaged and he can go anywhere he needs to, which makes him a lot more mobile than any of the heavy warjacks that we've seen so far. So that is a very, very useful ability, and does make sense with Thyra having that ability to get around. The second ability he has is Hand of Vengeance, and this is the exact same as it was in Mark III to Mark IV. When one or more friendly faction warrior models are destroyed or removed from play by an enemy attack while within 5 inches of this model gains +2 to its melee attack and melee damage rolls. So just so we know, with that +2 to its melee attack and melee damage rolls, it kicks this guy up to a mat of 10 and a POW of 19, which is staggering because that makes him hit better than the Butcher, who is the melee beast of, anybody really. And and swinging at 19s, he's hitting harder than pretty much anything. So you want to keep him around lots of units, because even though you don't want your units to die, if they die, it makes him even more of a terrifying ordeal for the enemy. His last ability is Sidestep, which also makes sense, being Thyra's personal warjack. Sidestep: when this model hits an enemy model with its initial melee attack or a melee special attack, it can advance up to 2 after the attack is resolved. So if you have him charge in, make his first initial attack, after that attack, he can move 2 inches, getting himself even deeper into enemy lines and allowing him to, even more decimate the enemy as well. So you can get him into combat, you can get him out of combat. He is very mobile for a heavy warjack. So, and that, all makes sense. Keeps him super, super mobile. Now, another thing, we hinted at that you probably didn't realize is his weapons have gotten better. So originally, he had a power of 16 on his weapons. It has been bumped up to 17, making him more of the heavy warjack that he is, giving him all the fun stuff there. He has a range of 1, and of course he has a standard mat of 8 until it gets ramped up to 10 when people start dying around him. But then he also has Grievous Wounds on his weapon. That's the same as Mark III. So Grievous Wounds: a model hit with this weapon loses tough and cannot have damage removed from it for 1 round. So that is great, and that is even more great when you're having him go up against things like War Beast, that if you clear out one of their spirals, their Warlock cannot heal him up, or anybody can heal him up. So this guy can just go ham on any type of dude that would rely on that healing, whether it be a Warp Wolf or just standard guys with multi-health boxes. You want this guy to go in there. But this guy is staggering. He's fast. He's deceptively much faster than you would think a heavy warjack should be. But with Thyra as his commanding Warcaster, he is phenomenal to have on the field and to keep him around her. So I do not look forward to ever having to go up against this guy in the future. But let's move on. Blessing of Vengeance. Blessing of Vengeance has served for more than 3 decades as a direct conduit for the divine prayers and miracles. It has channeled invocations of destruction onto the heads of the faithful's enemies, and blessing and bolstered the resolve of countless thousands of devoted soldiers. No wonder then that the benedictions of the Hierarch Severius fly with particularly potency when directed through his Warjack. Its eyes glow with fervor when it beholds enemies blasted to ash and lit afire by the holy power of Severius, and others authorized to pass judgment through the name of Menoth. Zealots whisper the blessings of vengeance can see straight into the man's soul, and stands ready to smite the impious. Hierarch Severius has overseen the maintenance of this revenger personally throughout its service, though none of the Protectorate would accuse him of sentimentality. Instead, the decision is purely practical. The Jack's contribution significantly to battle has learned to gauge through its masters accurately and has become well attuned to channeling Severius's prayers. The vassals of Menoth have invested much time and many precious resources rebuilding the Warjacks countless times, a reflection of the great value the Hierarch places on the machine. Severius greets each dawn as a reminder of the countless unbelievers awaiting punishment, and he orders blessings of vengeance made ready for him every day when he takes up his staff and conducts battle. Blessing of Vengeance seems aware that its function as intermediary for holy power requires it to stand unmolested on the field of battle. It perceives the approach of the enemy with palpable hostility, enthusiastically batters away intruders with its shield or obliterates them with unerring swings of its halberd. It will go to any length to avoid distraction in order to answer its master's needs, ready to channel the final reckoning deep into the heart of the enemy. Since Severius' ascension to Hierarch, keeping Blessing of Vengeance pristine and ready for battle has become an even higher priority. An entire choir and dedicated vassals of Menoth attend to the Jack at all times, foregoing the food and rest if necessary to prepare it for the next day's battle. It stands as the final line of defense against those who would harm the leader of their nation and the faith, both a dauntless bodyguard and an intimidating weapon. It has traveled from ancient Ictir to join the fray in many far-flung battlefields, from the Thornwoods to Laren to Umbri, always at Severius' side and untiring in its loyal vigilance. And yes, having one of these types of jacks would actually make sense as a personal bodyguard. It is a Revenger class after all, and this guy is probably light enough and fast enough to be able to block most things that are going to be coming at Severius' way. So yeah, but let's see how much more dangerous this guy actually is, because after all, he is a character and he is bonded to his personal Warcaster, even if Severius might not say he prefers this jack, but we all know he definitely does. And as always, we will start with his stat line. He is a speed 5, he is a mat 7, a defense 12, and arm 17. He does have a shield, so that will give him a little bit armor buff. We'll get down to that in a moment. He is a light jack, so he has the abilities of a light jack, which are slam and headbutt. And he has an arc node, as probably described in the text, so he can push out all of the Severius' nice spells onto the enemies way far afield. But let's go over his abilities. Alright, his big one, his bond for Severius. If this model begins the game, it's bonded Severius. We've already read that. So what it does is once per turn, when Severius channels a spell through this model, he gains +2 to the spell's attack and damage roll. So he literally takes the spell from Severius and he amps it up. Makes it way more powerful, way more dangerous. That's probably why Severius likes this guy so much, because he not only takes a spell, but he makes it better. So yeah, enough said on that one, and he's pretty cheap for a jack too, so I can understand why Severius always wants to have this guy. And for everybody that has seen Severius, his spell list is pretty astounding for everything that he can pull out onto the battlefield. The next ability he has is Defensive Strike, so once per turn, when an enemy model advances into and ends its movement or is placed in this model's melee range, this model can immediately make one basic melee attack. So the whole placed is a nice little add-on, because with especially unit movement, all the rest of the unit are placed within 2 inches of their main guy who moves. So that is a very useful ability to be able to stab at people that, get into your area. The final ability he has, which makes him very protective of Severius, is Shield Guard. When a friendly model is directly hit by a non-spray range attack, while within 3 inches of this model with Shield Guard, you can choose to have a model with shield guard be directly hit instead, and the model is hit and suffers all the damage and effects. A model can use shield guard only once per round and cannot use shield guard if it's incorporeal, knockdown, or stationary, and it can only be used once per attack. So he's very protective. He amps up spells that Severius shoots through him, and he has defensive strikes, so if anybody gets near him, he can poke him with his halberd. Makes him a very spicy jack, especially a very defensive jack. Is he able to take out big, huge, warjacks and war beasts? Maybe not, but he's very protective, so that's always a very useful, as we've mentioned before, on jacks that have shield guards. So let's go over his weapons. We have his repulsor shield, which gives him a +2 armor as long as his left arm is still capable, so it kicks his armor up to a 19, and with no backstrikes and Mark IV, it's a 19 all the time until that left arm is gone, so fantastic there. The ability on this weapon is Repel. When this model hits an enemy model with this weapon, the model hit is pushed 1 inch directly away from the model. And then when this model is hit with a melee attack, after the attack is resolved, the attacking model is pushed 1 inch directly away. So if he hits you with his shield, he pushes you back. If you hit him, he pushes you back, as long as this weapon is not crippled. So he pushes people away from him if somebody takes a swing at him or if he swings at you with this weapon. So that's actually kind of nice. Allows you to kind of have more field control with him. But let's go over his halberd, his main poking stick. It is a Mat 7 range 2, so he's got range on this one. And a POW 13. Oh, also his shield was a POW 12. So pretty low, but not the worst for a guy who's mostly used for protection. But his halberd is a, halberd, 2-inch reach spear or stabby weapon with a little axe head on the top. POW 13, and he has powerful charge. So when this model gains +2 to charge attack rolls with this weapon. So when he's charging, his mat goes up to a 9. So whatever he's charging, he's probably going to hit. But as read and as done up, he is not designed to go into direct combat. He is designed to move out front and be defensive, protect Severius, and amp up Severius's spells like crazy. But as far as him being a stabby thing on a stick that you throw out and you let him, take on the enemy in melee and do all the damage, he is not a damage doer. He is literally a arc node that amps up spells from Severius, and who protects Severius, and he keeps people away from him at all costs. So that's what his specialization is. He is a spell conduit for Severius, and still very good to have, and getting you an additional +2 to attacks and damage from your spells that are arc node through him makes that even more dangerous, for all of Severius's enemies. So, but let's move on. Eye of Truth. Rest pleasant with the glory of Menoth. The Eye of Truth banishes the foul sorceries of unbelievers with the might of the divine will. When this magnificent Warjack fights alongside Malekus, the burning truth, there is no place for the wicked and unrepentant to hide, and their perfidies are soon cleansed from the world. It is a machine that has transcended its humble origins as a simple weapon of war to become a true instrument of the Great Crusade. Assigned as the guardian of the great temple of the Creator at the heart of Soul, the Warjack that would become the Eye of Truth was among those serving in Fiora's battle group as the Signarns made their push to take the ancient holy structure, which had long stood as a symbol of the city's history and devotion to Menoth. When the fighting grew thickest, and the sweeps of battle forced the priestess of the flame elsewhere, the Warjack was left to fight without her guidance. It was at this point that Malekus, who had only recently discovered his Warcaster talent, witnessed the battered machine perform a miracle he ascribed to divine intervention. Acting of its own volition, the machine moved to bar the main entrance of the temple with its massive frame. It beat back waves of faithless intent on defying the sacred structure, which was not only a place of worship but also a crypt for the ancient Mennite kings and priests, housing countless relics stretching back to the time of Calasia. With sword and shield, it held its ground, and the holy light burned within the machine's eyes as flames leapt through the throngs of the enemies to char them where they stood. Just as the Warjack finally fell, reinforcements arrived. The Signarns were defeated, and the great temple was preserved. Though the machine lay battered and destroyed, a holy light had touched it, and Malekus was determined to see it restored. Malekus ordered the twisted and smoldering remains removed and taken to the artificers at the Incendium's disposal. With the approval of the Priestess of the Flame, he made the reconstruction of the Warjack his personal project, in addition to overseeing the work of the artificers tasked with rebuilding this chassis. Malekus performed extensive religious rites over the cortex and frame. The Warcaster spent weeks laboring in the intricacies of inscription and blessing, all while relishing the time spent with the machine he knew had been a vessel of the Lawbringer's power, a machine he now called the Eye of Truth. Made even more resplendent through the effort of Malekus, the Eye of Truth retains vestiges of the divine power that guided it to defend the temple. It has since manifested a number of surprising capabilities that even the most experienced vassals of Menoth and Soul Midnight artificers cannot explain. Enemies burst into flame before its gaze, and the Warjack serves as a conduit of Malekus' own prayers, extending his powers on the battlefield. And this guy is massive, just like Malekus, who's also massive because Malekus is freaking huge. But just like Malekus, this guy loves fire, likes to throw it out, likes to put it on all sorts of people. Which is weird that he likes fire so much, because he doesn't have a flamethrower or anything that would normally catch people on fire. You'll see in a second, but he literally just has to stare at somebody with his gaze and they burst into flames, which is kind of terrifying, but very, very protectorate. So yes, and he allows a bunch of other very fun stuff as well for Malekus, but we will read about that right now. Let's check the Mark III to Mark IV changes and see how much more dangerous this guy has become. And as always, we'll start with his stat line because that's always the most interesting. So he is a heavy jack. He has a speed 5, a mat 8, which has been increased. So Mark III only had a mat 7, so he's now a mat 8. His rat is still 6, defense is 10, armor is 19, although he does carry a shield, so that will drive him up to a 2-1-2-1. He is a large heavy warjack, so he does have all the abilities of a heavy warjack, including trample, slam, and headbutt. He also has immunity to fire, which makes sense since he can shoot out fire. Might as well make him immune to it himself. He has dual attacks, so he can make range attacks and melee attacks during the same activation. So that is always fun. His abilities have changed a little bit from Mark III to Mark IV. So we still have Ashen Veil, which is probably the most annoying spell to anybody that's had to go up against it. This model has concealment, so if you're shooting at him, his defense goes up to a 12. Living enemy models without resistance to fire suffer a -2 to attack rolls while within 2 of this model. So not only does he have concealment from range attacks, but if somebody is up in his melee range, he still gains his +2 defense basically. So yeah, and then he gives that to everybody within 2 inches of him. So if you got other people within 2 inches of him too, he kind of spreads that around. So very, very useful there. His bond with Malekus is probably the most interesting for such a heavy warjack. If he is bonded to Malekus, that's all normal bonding stuff, while the Eye of Truth is bonded to Malekus and in his control range, Malekus can channel spells through it. So this large freaking warjack can channel spells without an arc node. Yeah, that's just as dangerous as you think, and Malekus loves fire spells, so, you know, let it burn, I suppose. Then his other ability he has is Holy Light. While within 5 inches of this model, friendly models ignore bonuses from spells that add to an enemy model's arm and defense. So this guy shuts down arm and defense buffs on spells to not just himself, but every friendly model within 5 inches of him as well, making, well, pretty much making your enemy's spell or defense boost or armor bust from spells, you know, null and void while within 5. And this guy is very good at getting into the enemy's positions as well. So let's read over his the special ability they took off of him from Mark III to Mark IV was Oracle Vision. So that spell, if he's directly hit by an attack, you can immediately spend 1 focus to not suffer any damage from that attack. That has been removed. I imagine they didn't want to keep that going for some reason. Maybe they said it made him too broken. He is pretty high armor anyway, so I suppose they figure, oh, he'll probably take a beating or 2, so he'll be all right. But that happens sometimes. Let's go over his weapons. So he has the Gaze of Justice, the spell or the attack we were talking about earlier. And what this is he just stares at somebody and they burst into flames, which is terrifying. Very, you know, fire starter vibe on that one. So it is a Rat 6, range 8, rate of fire 1, AoE 0, and a POW 14. So it is a solo destroyer if you can hit the solo. The other special abilities on this weapon is he has Gunfighter, so he can attack models he's in melee with it. It is a magical weapon, it's fire damage, and it causes fire continuous effect. So if he doesn't destroy him outright with it, the fire will keep on burning as long as it's going. So POW 14 originally, and a POW 12 for every time they can't get that fire to go out. So yeah, very, very terrifying for anybody hit by that. And it's not even a flamethrower, so he doesn't even need ammo. How dangerous is that? But I digress. Let's go over his melee weapons. He has a shield. Mat 8, range 1, POW 14. Gives him a +2 armor, driving his armor all the way up to 21, as long as he still has that left arm capability. And with the Mark 4, 360-degree vision means he doesn't have any back arc, so his armor's always 21 until you remove that left arm. And then his melee weapon, Holy Wrath. It is a Mat 8, range 2, so it's a reach weapon. And it's a POW 18. POW 18's pretty dang staggering for anybody hit with a POW 18, including heavy warjacks. So this guy likes to get in there, do lots and lots of damage, and then he can channel spells and remove defense and armor buffs off of enemies. And he has Ashen Veil, so he can increase the defense of basically everybody within 2 inches of himself, including himself. So yeah, also his Holy Wrath weapon also has critical fire effects. So if you get a critical on the hit, he blasts them into fire, and it is a magical weapon, so he can take on incorporeal models, no problems at all. So yeah, this is definitely a powerhouse, definitely very, very Malekus in design. Yeah, I think this really takes Malekus up to a different level, and allows Malekus's enjoyment of fire and purging the non-believers to the next level. So, but that is it for today. Next week we will discuss the next 3 of the Protectorate's Character Warjacks as well, and then we can move on to the next portions of both of these classes, which will be the units and solos of both the Trollbloods and the Protectorate of Menoth's full glory and all the zealots that they have. Thank you guys so much for listening. If you are enjoying this, please like, subscribe, comment, let me know how I'm doing, let me know how you're enjoying this. Please share this with your friends and fellow gamers on your social media, whatever you use. It does help keep the class size growing, does help keep us going with the YouTube algorithms as well, for more and more people checking in with us. Also, another thank you to Steamforge Games for letting us continue to read this fantastic lore. And as always, class dismissed.